Almost got it. Ha! Don't forget to subscribe. Hiya, buds. I hope you're all doing well today. I have something a little different planned for this speed paint. I drew it first, and then I came up with a story to go with it. So sit back, get some snacks, and relax, because I'm going to take you to explore a new world. So let's have some fun. And leave me a comment. That'd be great. Thank you. Before the flood came, the entities claimed we'd be protected. All we had to do was stay. Anyone who left the city would be at risk, they said, and would be killed. They said they wanted us to be like them. They said they wanted us to live. I didn't believe them. After all, they were the unknown. They were dangerous. Why should we trust that they'd keep their word when they were the ones threatening our lives to begin with? When they had already killed so many innocent people? I tried to convince my family, tried to make them evacuate with everyone else. It seemed smarter, more responsible, more reliable. But my sister refused, and my parents chose her side. I still don't really know why. Maybe she knew something I didn't. Maybe they were just easily swayed. But it hardly matters now, and it didn't matter at all back then. I was still a minor. They forced me to stay. It was dark in the closet when the first of it started to seep in. It trickled under the gap in the door, slowly filling up the tiny room until I was floating in it, trapped between the ceiling and the glowing, shimmering liquid. It wasn't even water. It felt thicker. It hummed with energy and clung to my body like a glove, even as it stole the last of my air until I was fully submerged. I was going to drown in it. I was going to die. I held my breath for as long as I could. I fought for as long as I could. I think it could sense my struggle, my refusal, because when the change came, it hurt. From what I heard later, it wasn't supposed to hurt. Every fiber of my being screamed. It twisted and fought, and it was as if my soul was drowning in fire. I couldn't let this happen to me. I couldn't give in. My parents had forced this on me. It wasn't my choice. I blacked out to the worst pain I've ever felt in my life, physical and emotional. Their betrayal burned in my heart just as much as the change itself. When I woke up, I had webbing between my fingers. My skin was pale, almost translucent. I had never seen my veins so bright. They glowed, casting the rest of me in a golden tinge. My legs were covered in tiny bumps, the beginning of little orange scales emerging from the flesh in patches of painful pinpricks. My chest was covered in them too, and it itched like crazy. The dark of the closet was stifling. It was still filled with liquid, but this was actual water. I could feel it. It didn't hum with energy. It didn't cling to me. It wasn't what caused the change. But I knew that didn't matter anymore. It had already happened. I tried to breathe and choked. I had gills. I could feel them each time I took a breath, on my waist and on my neck. It felt wrong, so incredibly wrong. Time passed as I came to terms with my new reality. No one came for me. I'm still not sure what happened to my family, if they had control of themselves, or if they transformed completely and let instinct take them to the entities. Either way, I was left alone. I might have died in that closet if I hadn't been so panicked. I discovered the hard way that I had changed in more ways than one. I remember staring down at my hands in shock. The water had responded to me, ripping the top of the closet off and causing absolute destruction to the building itself. The hole left in the roof of my house can attest to that, even now. I had fled in a panic, swimming faster than I ever had. The streets had been abandoned. There was trash floating everywhere. Plastic and paper and everything that had been tethered with gravity was now lost to the flood. I needed air. I needed to get away from this. I needed to escape to the surface like I had originally planned. If only they had let me. Chapter 1. I ducked behind a ruined car and peeked out warily. There they were, just around the bend in the street. They were advancing quickly, swimming far faster with their powerful tails than I could with my tired, scaly legs. Their bodies were mostly scales, the wide, thick kind that could repel nearly any weapon, and the parts that weren't were protected by odd, shimmering armor. The Mer were beautiful but deadly, and had been hunting me ever since I'd been spotted leaving my home in the ruined city of Cosgray. My life had been pretty much torture for the past few months. I wasn't human anymore, that much was certain. There were few humans left. They lived in scattered camps on the scant amount of dry land left on the surface. It was admittedly kind of dumb, but I had convinced myself that there had to be at least one that would accept me. I'd been forced into this against my will. My agonizingly slow change was evidence of that, if nothing else. Too bad that hope had been quashed ages ago, when I'd barely escaped with my life from a couple of camps closest to me. They didn't even try to listen to what I had to say. It was a shoot first, study the body later ideology. It kinda stung, like a lot. I winced just thinking about it and crouched down behind the car. I was ready to dart away the second the Mer passed my hiding spot, given that they didn't sense me right away. I was under the impression that I was rather hard to peg down, though, or they would have caught me months ago. I held my breath as they drew closer, and I could see them in more detail. They had been human once, I was pretty sure. Some of them still had shreds of normal clothes under their armor. One still had golden hoop earrings hanging from her pierced facial fins. For them, the change had been almost instantaneous, easy and pain-free. I was almost jealous. I was an anomaly, a freak by both human and Mer standards. But maybe if I held it off long enough, I could find a cure. Well, when I thought about it that way, it really made me sound like some sort of weird fish zombie. I mean, I could be. There wasn't exactly a handbook. I stayed totally still as the group of Mer swam past me. They were talking to each other, though I had to focus really hard on the weird clicking noises to make sense of it. I still thought in English. The Mer language hadn't quite taken over my mind yet, and I was trying to keep it that way.
Don't be afraid, girl. I'm going to hurt you. Eternal wishes to speak with you.
I frowned and rolled my eyes. Sure, the giant alien entity wants to sit down over lunch and have a nice chat. I'm sure y'all will just waltz me right over to it and everything will be fine. I may have believed it if I hadn't watched them raid my last hiding place with the intent to murder me in my sleep. I still wasn't sure how I'd gotten out of that alive. I'd just had a really strong feeling to go for a walk. Well, a swim. And had come back to see them stabbing through the seaweed to see if I was swaddled up in it for a nap. I had been about 20 minutes prior, but it really didn't give me much faith in their attempts to get me out of hiding. I wasn't going to stop running. They'd have to kill me first.
Don't sense her. Probably moved on. Calm water. Catch up eventually.
They clicked, then swam away towards the calm shallows. The ocean wasn't very deep there, and it had been my next destination, but now I needed to rethink my plan. Not that there was much of a plan to begin with. I hadn't quite recovered from being shot at by complete strangers last time. I waited for a while, just to make sure they really left. I couldn't feel them anymore, but their scent lingered in the water. Finally, I swam out from behind the car and looked around. I was in a deeper part of the ocean, one that had sunken rather than simply flooded. The few buildings here looked totally wrecked. They seemed to be stores of some kind, though the signs were indiscernible beneath a thick layer of scum and salt. I adjusted my backpack. One of the mer had ripped a strap off when they caught me by surprise a few weeks ago, and swam into the open window of the building nearest to me. It seemed to have been some kind of thrift shop. There were still clothes on the racks, though they'd been pushed around by the flow of the water and were probably not where they'd originally been. Knickknacks littered the shelving and floors, mostly broken in some way, but occasionally I'd see something that looked fine. A few fish scattered as I swam past them to pick up a plastic fanny pack I saw floating in the corner. It still had air inside, and I could see a pristine business card in the tiny front pocket. I stared at it for a while, probably longer than I should have. After a moment, I opened the big pocket, letting the air out in globular bubbles that collected on the ceiling. It would come in handy to have something waterproof, but for now I just needed it for the extra space. I picked up a pocket knife, score, and put it in the fanny pack, along with a small tin of Vienna sausages I found under some old magazines. Canned food was getting harder and harder to find, but I had an okay supply in my backpack, and I wasn't adverse to eating raw fish. Well, not anymore. You get over that kind of thing when you're hungry enough. I scrounged around for a little while longer, though I didn't find much of use. It was edging closer to nighttime, and the sounds were growing odder. It still freaked me out sometimes, the echoey way that sound traveled under the waves. The clicking, the whale song, the perpetual shifting of the currents. I had grown more used to it, but every now and then it would make me on edge. Before I left the thrift shop, I pulled a black windbreaker off one of the racks and held it in my hands. It was still in okay shape, but I had no use for it now. I couldn't cover the gills on my waist without some discomfort, and I didn't really get cold in the same way I used to. I didn't even really need clothes anymore. My scales had matured, a shimmering ombre of green and orange covering my legs and chest completely. Only my waist, shoulders, arms, and face were left uncovered, albeit speckled with tiny bumps that would one day be scales. I could feel the start of fins poking out of my forearms, too. Well, at least I still have my hair. None of the ex-humans seem to have lost that. I reached up and touched the light brown tresses that swirled above my head. The thought wasn't nearly as reassuring as I would have liked, but if my hair was all I got to keep, at least it was something. The few non-human mer I had seen looked quite bold, actually. I dropped the windbreaker, letting it float in place, then swam out the same window I'd entered through. I couldn't smell any pursuers, so I adjusted my bag again and decided to try one more building before moving on for the night. A place they'd already checked should be safe enough to linger in, anyway, and I was hoping to find a bit more food. I swam out into the night in the hopes of finding a better tomorrow. And that's the end of everything I have written for this, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do me a favor and like this video and leave comments. This isn't something I've done before. Share my, writing through, I don't know what this was. Like an auditory adventure, like a little snippet of a novel that doesn't exist. But whatever it was, I hope you enjoyed it. Please just let me know and share it with other people if you liked it. And maybe I'll do more in the future. Alright, cool. You all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!